Vertical Pursuit, episode number 31. Welcome in, Mike Barrett, Mike Tatlock. We in recent episodes, we've, not in a bad way, but have kind of gotten away from kind of what we initially kind of set off with this. When we talked about the reasoning that we created the podcast was kind of a place for men, broken men who are under attack. And that's kind of the topic. It's something I've been wanting to talk about, but last week, I was even more reminded of this when you and I were elk hunting. And I came back, and how we always do it now is video photos of the experience. And I was showing it to some guys. You know, people ask, what was that like? And you show them. And then I had a couple of friends who are just like, let me see that again. Will you send me the video of you walking through a field? They go, I don't care about seeing an animal that's been shot. I want to see. And then one of my friends said, he goes, you guys are real men. And I said, well, don't get carried away. He said, but I want to go do something that's manly, accomplish something. And I thought about it when I was out there, and I thought about, and you don't have to be a hunter, so don't get me wrong here, but how we're instinctively wired that way, and how when you do that, it carries with it a satisfaction that maybe you can't explain. And I do feel like that in our DNA, in our wiring, the hunter-gatherer, to break it right down, it's something that if you live in a urban area or a larger city, or you just don't have a chance because of work or whatever, to ever get out and do something to scratch that itch that is inside of you, I'm not sure you understand it. And I think it gives you license to therefore be a man. And I know these days men are, we're going to talk more about this, but kind of been neutered a little bit. Mm-hmm. And I think intentionally neutered, and to the point where they just throw their arms up and they don't know what to do. But first of all, do you get that same feeling when you're out doing that kind of stuff?
Gosh. And I, like you said earlier, I know it's not everybody's thing. Your definition of masculinity does not equal being a hunter, but it's what it represents. It's what's behind that I think is missing for a lot of men. And I get it. Like when we go out, you get up early in the morning and it's black, it's dark, and there's this sense of expectation.
Yeah.
That's what I love.
The preparation.
Yeah. It's like, how many times do we sit and we spend probably more hours in preparation than we do in the actual hunt itself.
Even at home, when we've got a 4.5 hour drive ahead of us because we're going out in the middle of nowhere, and just gathering the stuff in the garage and putting things together, there is such, I don't want to say freedom in that, but there is as you said, there's an expectation of what's about to come. And the crescendo and the actual event or the shot or the harvesting, it's so secondary at that point. And it's necessary. I mean, I love filling the freezer, and I love filling the freezer with the best organic, free range, all that stuff. But as you said, and I think it starts with the preparation, and there's probably a reason. Do you feel your body start to change in the fall a little bit?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The fall, everybody, you can sense the season changes from summer, and then the fall comes. And what's so cool too, though, is like, I was just thinking about this, and I know there's people listening that are like, yeah, I totally get hunting, I'm fine with it. And I get people who push back on it, and it's like, okay, well, do you eat meat? And they say, well, yeah.
From somewhere.
Like, okay, well, okay, don't be a hypocrite. But anyways, that's for another episode. But one of the things that was super cool that I realized this last week, I don't know if I told you this, but we had just got back from hunting, and you got your elk down, and we went out. I had both my kids, my daughter, my son, both got their elks. So there was that sense for me, like I didn't pull the trigger this time, and
I felt kind of bad about that.
No, because I loved watching you get yours, and I love watching them get there. Like I was, the hunt thing it's as exciting for me to watch a brother or my kids achieve that end result. And so that's the community part of it too. See, that's the other thing. I'm not a lone hunter. Don't just throw me out in the woods. There's guys like that. It's actually pretty cool. It's intense, but there's something about the communal part of the hunt. and being out there together. It's hiking together. It's spotting together. It's, you know, it's being there in that moment of, okay, it's going to happen, and your adrenaline is running and you hear the sounds. I mean, we're sitting here. If you've never heard an elk bugle, it is otherworldly. It's prehistoric.
Yeah.
It's the sights, the sounds, the smell, the adrenaline, be quiet, be careful of every step you take.
Tracking them. And bugling and cow calling and
all of it.
I know.
All of that. But then to watch, so that's why for me the communal part. And then what I didn't tell you was the communal part followed us home in a way that I was surprised. And there's a family in our church, a really awesome family, the Kane family. I'll just say their names. Scott and Stacy are awesome. And Stacy, they raise hogs. And this is like the day after we got back. And we get this phone call and she's like, hey, we slaughtered a hog. And she had the back of her pickup truck. She had like 3 or 4 of these big white coolers. And she was just going to a friend's house, dropping off the bounty of their harvest and sharing. And so like we had pork shoulders and bacon. Oh my goodness. Like we got slabs of bacon and I mean, just all this great stuff, just generously saying, here you go. And of course my response was, I said, Stacy, we got elk down when those are ready. How about that? And like, I miss the communal aspect of not just the hunt, but enjoying the bounties of the hunt. And I think we miss pieces of that, a lot of that in our community and culture. I think that we are so individualistic and isolated that we forget the interconnectivity, and actually interdependence is a good thing. And we don't see it. But anyways, when it comes to hunting, like I know we got two cows down. My son and daughter each got one. We're not eating all of that. And every year we do this, we bring the cooler to the church staff and the families in the church, and we just let everybody have meat, and it's free. And so like there's a joy on the other side of being a provider. And all of that kind of ties together to what is this whole experience of the hunt. All of the things we've talked about go in that one box.
And there's so much that goes with that in terms of when I think about when we're out at this particular piece of land, which used to be an old town back in the 1800s. And there's, you and I have walked around and explored. There are old gold mines and there are old log cabins from 1800s. And then so I always bring this up when we're out there, and especially when I'm walking around and I'm talking to you. It's a sport to us and it's a release to us. But then I always think back at the necessity that the hunt was to those people at the time. Because if we go a day or 2 out there and we don't get anything, we're like, oh, shoot, we'll try again in the morning. Let's put a burger on the stove or whatever. And then it's all about storage and all those things I think about, and not having any way to really store meat. That's where you get into the salting and, in some of the houses out there, we've seen the hole they've dug where they try to store and preserve as much as they can. But anyway, I think it's being busy and tasked with providing in that kind of a way is probably in our society and our age now of, where we're at in time. Probably the least important part of it, but when you think of it that way, and you think about the busyness of human beings and the drive that it takes to do things, and then you think of men today, particularly, and the kind of things are too easy.
Yeah.
And the apathy takes over, whereas you don't have to do all this stuff. And then especially in our day and age now, where people are being paid to stay home and do nothing and, be on social media or play video games. And there's nothing wrong with some of that. But it's just like, I just think as a culture, and certainly as men, it's nice to be reminded of maybe our cause and our purpose and our meaning when we go out to do something like that, even though we don't have the same mindset of somebody that had to go kill to eat. And if you didn't kill, you weren't eating.
Right.
But I'm always, when I'm out there, my mind usually goes back, because I like history anyway, but usually goes back in time, and I try to put myself in a position of somebody back then. And I will say this too, another part that I'm reminded of, and I see in us, and I see in every other hunter I know, is the massive respect they have for the process, for the biology of how it works. and how, the biology of the harvest, the necessity of the harvest. And we see these herds coming back stronger and better every year. And we'll have, fish and game guys tell us, well, there needs to be 10 or 15 cows taken out of that herd, elk, taken out of that herd in order to help that herd thrive. And so you start to understand that the way that I think people in maybe an urban area or people who've never experienced it don't understand how necessary it is, how beneficial it is. It's pruning, to put it in yard work terms. And so I always think about all of those things when we do this, but how blessed we were to be involved and have access to something like that. And it's always a bummer when the summer is coming to an end and you're starting to see the calendar days tick off, but then to have that to look forward to every year and the hunt, and you start to hear people talk about it, and all of a sudden the algorithm that runs my social media starts cranking up with hunting stuff. And so I know people who aren't into it. Maybe you've seen a video of dudes putting sunglasses on a dead elk or deer, or, screwing around I will tell you that is a tiny fringe of what you see in these people. And the men that we talk to and women who are hunters and who have this great respect for the process, the result. And then like me, if I'm eating dinner and I'm eating elk that I shot, harvested, I don't throw it away.
Right.
I'm more careful with it because I respect the process in which it was gained.
See, I love what you said about that. Because I think a lot of people look at hunting, especially if you don't know, but we do this with everything. What is not your world, you become critical of, and everybody believes the outlier things. We all do that. What's the outlier? The minority, and we say, the minority is the norm. No, it's not. Majority of hunters are people who have learned the sense of the responsibility to take care of ourselves, to take care of our families. And I think with our push in a tech world, there's a saying that what you don't master masters you. And I think we use technology to serve us. I think we end up serving technology. And it is a great tool. Don't get me wrong. Technology is designed around the thing of convenience. The problem, though, is if we're so about convenience, we miss out on the whole process that you're talking about. And that process is actually part of our being, is part of who we are. We talk about these hunts. You're managing livestock. You're managing the wilderness. There's conservation involved. There's what keeps these herds thriving is that some have to be thinned out. And people don't understand that, but that's actually best for that in the end result. So it's necessary. It's not just something we enjoy as a sport. We do. I'm not going to lie. It's something we enjoy. There is a sporting aspect to it. There's a challenge involved. And I think that's the other side of it. It's the challenge.
Yeah.
Because there's something in us that longs for that challenge to overcome. And the world of convenience wants to eliminate all challenges. The problem is, what does that actually create? Okay, so I want to tell a real quick story. So I go to Montana this last summer, and I'm speaking at a youth camp. Again, granted, it's Montana, and so just context,
Easy
right?
crowd.
But I'll compare it to something I heard of inner city kids in New York. I saw similarities. So I'll take two radically different contexts: inner city New York, and then Montana. And here's what I'm going to draw the conclusion on. So I'm in Montana. I'm at a youth camp. And one of the dads comes up to me and says, "Hey, my son over there, who was a sophomore in high school, said, hey, my son got his first bear hunt and got a bear." And I was like, "Whoa, that's awesome. That's pretty cool." I said, "Tell me about it." He's like, "Well, my son," this is literally what the dad's telling me. They have some property that backs up to some forest and mountains and stuff right outside the back of their house. And so he said, my son, who's a sophomore, grabbed two of his other buddies. So 3 sophomore high school boys. And they went by themselves for 3 days in the woods.
That's awesome.
He said by themselves. And he goes, I was in my office, and he goes, I get a call, and it was my son who's like, "Dad, we got a bear down, but we need help." And so the dad's like, I went home, I saddled the horse, rode back up to where they were at. He had a GPS location and came home. And I was like, oh my gosh, where do you see sophomore boys that are, I'm going to go into the wild and take down a bear? And I know every parent would instantly freak. But one of the things I've noticed about a lot of those kids, there was a resilience because, and it wasn't just the kids hunting. These are kids in rural community. They grew up, 14 years old. You're driving a combine. You're helping on the family property. And that could be a kid that's 12 years old and gets his first paper route. There's just something about taking responsibility early and having to earn something and the challenge of earning that. Like, what does that do? And the resilience, because this translates into all of life's challenges. And there's life challenges you can control, like a hunt. You can control a hunt. You can go out, and if it doesn't work out, okay, it didn't work out, and you go home. But what about the challenges of life you don't control? And what are we doing that prepares ourselves for those challenges? And so, like, I look at that young kid, and they've learned to face fear. They've learned to face adversity, all the skills it takes in. I mean, everything goes into that. I'm like, that's going to apply to every other challenge they face. When I was in New York City, so here's the comparison. I was talking to a youth pastor that I'm friends with, and I said, hey, I noticed something when I was riding the subway. I noticed that around 3:00 every day, there were like these fifth graders by themselves, because they had their school uniforms on, like by themselves, riding the subway all over the place, which you wouldn't see that here in suburbia. Mm-mm. You would not see a fifth grader, on their own riding the subways of New York City. And he used to be a youth pastor out here in the suburbs of Oregon. And he said, what I've noticed the difference between suburbia teens and inner city teens is the inner city teens in New York, at least where he's at, they're more resilient because they've had to learn at a younger age to kind of face not the wild of the wilderness, but the wilderness of the city, and kind of having to take that responsibility and navigate things and learn discernment and be aware of dangers and all those sort of things. So again, that's a nuance to everything we're talking about.
No, that makes total sense. It's them, even though the challenge is different, it's still a challenge.
Yeah.
And it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And we've run from things that are uncomfortable.
Exactly. And the convenience. And I heard it, and this is, so here's a parallel, because I think this is something that just hit me while we're talking right now, is there's a saying as a parent that if you love your kid but don't challenge them, you end up coddling them. If you challenge your kid but don't love them, you end up crushing them. And I see that happening in our culture with men right now. We're either coddling men or we're crushing men. That's what's happening in our society. We are either just making life so convenient, and men are growing up, and we're coddling them. We're removing the challenges so they don't have the resilience. They are emotionally fragile or whatever it might be, because we want to cater to convenience. And so you have that growing up. But then on the other side, we're just going to demonize men, and we're going to challenge the things that aren't right about them, because men we're not perfect. So let's exploit all the weaknesses of men, but there's never any sense of respect and empathy and compassion for who men really are. And so we end up crushing men. And that's what's happening. We're raising generations of either crushed men or coddled men.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, as you think about the silliness, and we've all been through this, but like, and I've exposed my kids to some of the hunting world, and my son got one. And, but then you do think about how quickly you come home and how they lose their crap when the Wi-Fi goes down or the phone doesn't work like it should, or, all these little silly things and I think that's why, for me anyway, personally, that's why, and we only really do it once a year where we go out and hunt. Why I look forward to it, because I remember one hunt a few years ago, and there's certain things I always think it's interesting what you remember. And usually they're the times where you faced a little danger. And this was probably 3 or 4 years ago. You and I were hunting in like mid-November, but it happened to be a really nice evening. The sun was going down. Your son dropped an elk, crossed a canyon, but we had walked in like 2 or 3 miles. And now by the time we're getting ready to dress the elk in the field, which takes a little while, and it was not a horrible extraction, but it wasn't really easy. I say, well, I'll go back and get the side-by-side because we got to haul this out of here. And then it's pitch black. We're out in the middle of nowhere. and it's high desert, but there's trees, and there's kind of a 2-track road, but it's not great.
Yeah.
So I had left it the side by side, my sidearm. So you gave me one. I thought, well, give me that at least. And then I had my cell phone light on my cell phone, and that's all I had. So I start the way back, and I'm thinking, can I find my way back? And I realize 400 yards away, I didn't bring a radio with me, which normally you always have a communication device because there's no cell service out there. And I'm walking along, but I'm hearing stuff, and and I know how many mountain lions there are out there. But I'm walking down this road, and my head's starting to get on a swivel because you get that the hair stands up in the back of your neck when you feel like you're being tracked. Yeah. And I don't know that I was.
Well, just real quick, keep talking, but just so our listeners know, this area we hunt, and specifically this property that we hunt, last year, in a matter of a handful of months, they took 15 cougars.
Yeah. And didn't make a dent in the population.
Right. So we know that. We know they're out there. So when you're walking by yourself, I've had that feeling. You've had that feeling. Keep going. Keep sharing that.
So twice that's happened, both on hunts with you, one time or a long time ago, when I'm standing there with Jim and he says, go find those guys. And I take off and I realize again, I don't have a sidearm at all with me. And I don't think I had a radio. And I had to go find you guys, and somehow I found you guys because you were tracking a herd of deer at this time. But I always remember, and then I had a particularly hard hunt, I don't know, 4 years ago, going up the side of this. I wasn't in great shape, and I'm like, I was not a mountain goat like this, but the extraction was so tough, and it was like 8 degrees, which, by the way, I was sweating because I was wearing, wool because I was expecting to be sitting. But that's the other cool part of it is, in terms of the various kinds of hunting, and I've done duck hunting and everything else, but you're kind of sitting. Elk hunting, you got to follow them in many cases, and they're such athletes, the way they live their lives. But I have memories of every hunt I've been on, but the moments of fear and real big challenge were almost not really, but to some degree, you feel like you're in real danger or could be in danger. Number one, of being lost. I've had that several times out there where I'm like, I don't know where I am and I can't read the stars and all that stuff. And all I have is a cell phone light that really wasn't doing much good. And then I had I had a little way to protect myself, but it was just a 380. It would have just pissed something off if I hit it. So I'm like, I'm not dropping anything with this. I think you gave me your Ruger 380. Probably that. I have the same gun, but I remember those times. And I think because just like in our lives, I suppose those moments, and then the relief of seeing off in the distance, the side by side, and knowing I had made it. But how much of that do we get in a normal neighborhood life? Right. And I don't remember those things, but I remember the times when I had a weird rush of adrenaline and the thought that what if there is, because I could hear something and I don't know what it was back behind me. And I'm like, what if I was being tracked? And what if I don't know how many times we've been out there, but it is funny how, and this is probably a tiny bit off the subject, but there have been a couple of times out there when there's some sixth sense, when you know something is watching you.
It's true.
And I remember those moments, and it probably wasn't anything, but there have been a few moments when I'm like, there's something feels weird, that something's behind me. And we haven't really having any bad moments, but I do know a guy who's a buddy of mine who's a chief of police. He was tracked like that and ended up shooting a cougar who was in mid-flight, pouncing on him. Happened to have, him too. I'll tell you the story later, but he was sitting kind of in a ditch, and he had been, scoping elk and wasn't paying attention, and finally looks up, and this cougar's at full sprint toward him. Wow. And he draws. He happened to have a sidearm on him. Yeah. He drew and dropped it, but he'd have been ripped apart. So all those stories are in my mind as I'm creating my own scenario in a situation. But my point is, I guess, in all of this is it's phenomenal, and the freedom I feel in being challenged in something, because I don't face any of that. And I think that's why we watch Yellowstone, or we watch these, it's why I like some of these programs on Discovery, these homestead guys or these Alaskan bush people and all this. That's why we're drawn to that, I think, because there's a certain part of that is aspirational for us as humans, but then as speaking for you and I as men, there's something that we like about it. But in terms of kind of the way I started this about, John Tyson is a great pastor, and you sent me a reading that he did that I've sent to a lot of other people. And it talks about kind of one of the greatest challenges for men right now. And it talks about how the root issue among men, he says, something it's lust or pornography or the battle, to fight being promiscuous, or it's kind of a misogyny can even be these days, abuse, all these things that cause damage. And certainly a lot of them do, lacking purpose and lacking intimacy, as we've tried to maybe kind of illustrate on this podcast, and vision. But he has whittled it down to apathy is kind of the biggest challenge facing men, and kind of a softening of the heart. And I guess when I say becoming a soft man, now in our society, there are some people who think that's a great thing, and they think that any kind of toxic masculinity should be stamped out. I disagree.
Yeah.
I disagree. And I think that they've pushed so far. We see reads like this and you go, it's almost like you forgot why we're here.
Exactly. Well, I think that's the aspect of all of this comes back to this idea, like apathy. What's the opposite of apathy? I think for me, the opposite of apathy is having purpose.
Yeah.
And when you lose purpose, and one of the ways you lose purpose is you become apathetic. You just kind of go, I'm numb. And so what happens though is, and we said this too, we said this the other night, we had our time, I think it was just a couple nights ago. Yeah. We get together and just talk from like 9 to midnight as just dudes and process stuff. And one of the things we were talking about is when men lose purpose, they pursue pleasure, and we replace purpose with pleasure. And are there things we can enjoy in life? Yeah. So when we talk about pleasure, I talk about pleasure beyond the boundaries in which God wants us to enjoy them. And that's what easily happens is like when you lose purpose. And I think then pleasure becomes part of our coping, because deep inside, not having purpose leaves a void. I have a void inside. So what am I going to fill that with?
It's going to be filled with something.
It's got to be filled with something. Because
and John talks about, to add to what you're saying, he describes this disease of apathy as a sort of heavy sadness that presses down on a man's mind in such a way that no activity pleases him. It's a kind of malaise that takes away the motivation to do anything. And then he says what I think is the most powerful way to describe it, a numbing of the heart.
Yeah.
And that's powerful to me. And I 100, this is like one of those things, like when I read the first chapter of John Eldredge, Wild at Heart. Yeah. I remember reading it years ago when I first had my son. And I felt almost by reading it, I felt license to be a man again all of a sudden. And that doesn't mean, I know even to say that these days is people then call you a bunch of names. It's not that. But to me, it is again, a discovery of a purpose of who we are and who we were meant to be.
Absolutely. There's a verse in Proverbs in the Bible where it says that the purposes of a person are like a deep ocean inside. And it takes one with insight to draw it out. And I think that God puts inside of us a purpose. And
a cause
to live for. And it's inside of it. He puts that in it. Like we're wired, like humanity, men, women, but we're wired in such a way that when we get up, we're destined to live a life of purpose, significance. And then when we don't, that's that malaise, that's that apathy, that's that numbness that comes over us because something's not right inside. We feel off. We feel, whatever other lies attached to that and insecurities. And I think that's why I would say this, why we as men, it's okay to say this. This is the area of our vulnerability. And we are as vulnerable, like fragile people in some regards. Yes, of course, where we come home to our spouses and like their words have weight. And if those words press into that,
so true,
then it reinforces what we're already feeling inside. And so
And it's kind of a house of cards.
It is a
Your identity can be a house of cards,
Yeah.
especially as the case with me.
Right.
And there have been times my wife has said, where she'll say something and she can see that it just cuts, and this doesn't happen often, but cuts my legs out. And part of it is weakness on my part. But part of it is I realize how fragile my identity is and how much it's become.
Yeah.
And so that's a really good way to put it. And we know we have a lot of ladies who listen, and men, same thing for you too, with your wives. I'm not saying we're just saying it because we're men and that's where our personal experience lies. But yes, you're absolutely right when you say the weight of those words. And you think, we come home in camo with elk blood on our shoes and want to tell stories and whatnot, but we're weak in that too. Yeah. We're vulnerable in that, as you said.
Absolutely. And I think that's why the sense inside when you have those words that you're pointed out, that's why John Eldredge, you brought him up. John Eldredge for years, I think, led kind of this reviving renewal to masculinity, because he said guys are built for a battle and a purpose and challenge, adventure, all of those things. Now, that's all labeled toxic because that's a whole other podcast. But I think that's all done to keep men domesticated.
Yeah, yes. Very true.
Personally. And so, because if you have a domesticated man that he's not living his life on purpose, he's a defeated man. And a defeated man becomes a generation of other defeated men.
Yeah.
And we pass that down. And it breaks down society. I mean, we know right now statistically that when you talk about things in society, kids dropping out, kids failing, suicide rates, by the way, are the highest amongst men.
Way higher for men.
Way higher for men. Way higher. Even and these are, again, this is facts. You could look this up. Incarcerations are, of course, highest amongst men. They even attribute the abortion rate to the lack of healthy masculinity and male role models. So if you want to crumble a society, take your men out.
Yeah, for sure. And the way that, to give another quote from John, men need to give themselves something. Men are at their best when they are giving their strength sacrificially for the sake of others. And so if you're not in a fight for something, that's when that passivity comes in, that apathy comes in. And then he continues, I want to be in a war. I want to give myself for things that really matter. I don't want to be a shallow man with a small vision, a small heart, and a small capacity. I want to be known in heaven and hated in hell.
I love that statement.
How great is that?
I love that statement. I love that statement.
And then he follows it up with a whole bunch of scripture that kind of backs it and shows, once again, as we've talked about a lot, that even back then men were wrestling with this. And there were warnings about the result when you aren't feeding those things that need to be fed, to get back to a hunting analogy. But so it's okay. Now we always get to this point. Now we've identified it. And I think that everybody agrees and certainly identifies with some of the things that we're talking about. And hopefully men are out there listening. It's okay, first of all. You're not alone. We all have these moments. We all feel these things. You, Pastor Tatlock, are normally asked the questions, much more than somebody like I am. What's the fix to some of this? And what are steps that men in our world, maybe who are bogged down with, I don't want to say duties like it's a bad thing, but duties where you get to the end of the day and go, what did I really do today? What did I accomplish? Did I face, clearly I wasn't being tracked by a mountain lion. My life was never at risk. And so it doesn't always have to be that, but is there some kind of step or process or progress you can make when I give the line that men are at their best when they are giving of themselves sacrificially for others? And is that as simple as getting involved in something in terms of helping people out, or, examples of men starting different nonprofits or starting, even now, how easy is it to start a web page or a social media handle where you start to try to do things to help others, even not financially, but just even mentally, like what this podcast is meant to do. We're not benefiting financially from this, that's for sure. But it is something that maybe sacrificially, even through time, can provide others with men, because we know men isolate. And that's where a lot of this bad stuff happens, especially when you start talking about suicide and just self-defeat. But what are some things that you would say are steps that men today can take to make sure they don't end up in an apathetic pit where they still have purpose, where their identity is still fed, and they still can find some way to sacrificially benefit others?
Yeah, that's so good. Because you know what? I think the thing on that too is everybody says don't find your identity in work. And that is true, you know, because your jobs can change. And so if my identity is in a coach, and either I get fired as a coach or I retire as a coach, then I've lost myself, right? I do think we find our identity in our purpose. And purpose is bigger than just a single job. Our purpose can play out in single jobs, but we have a purpose. That's why, like, the Bible says that God created us, the way it says that God created us to do good works in Christ. And so we are called to do these good works. It says he predestined us. The word destiny that is used in that. So I have a destiny. My destiny is this, and this is the picture. God creates all of us to discover what he's doing and to partner with him. And when you do that, you discover your purpose. And that's the destiny he has for each of us. And then there's this other word. That's a really cool word. It says that we, each of us, men and women, we are God's craftsmanship or workmanship. We talked about this at a podcast before, where it's imagine a piece of art, or, one of the things that's really cool is you gifted me, and I love it. I have it in my office because I use it. It's so funny. It sits in my office at the church because it becomes this reference when I'm doing pastoral counseling. And I refer to it all the time, but it's so cool. You took all these like old license plates and bent, rusted, and you shaped it into the symbol of a fish, of a logo that we like, Sims Fishing. And so it meant a lot to me. And so it's really cool. It's a piece of art that you used all these metal license plates, but you shaped it and you formed it. And now it's a piece of art. That's that passage when he says that we are God's workmanship. The word there is, it's actually the word, we are his poetry. We are his piece of art. We are his, we are the result of his work.
I've heard you say that so many times, but each time I find I stick some other meaning to that. That's so meaningful to imagine that.
Yeah.
So for me, where it helps me is when I run myself down or when I start to kick myself around internally, which I do a lot, unfortunately. I think a lot of guys do. I remember that. I try to remember, would I want somebody doing that about a piece of my craftsmanship?
Yep.
And that's I love that. I'm sure that I could make anything for you, and I tend to make stuff, and you would wrap a sermon around it because you just see things that way. And it's so good though that you can take those, and it's easy for people. Like I just said, you talk about the word being living and active. Well, so are these things that we hear so much. Like I've heard you say that so many times, and it just hit me kind of like, I get that. I get what you're saying. I get not only that you've repurposed it in the form of a lesson and a teaching, but also it makes me realize, I don't want somebody taking something. I mean, it gives me pride to know that something that and it wasn't that big of a deal. It's cool, but it wasn't, they're neat, but it wasn't like I worked 6 months on it. But my point is, it doesn't matter, because the fact that it had a bigger purpose or meant something to you, or that maybe means something to somebody else, rather than chucking it in a garage sale, which you could have done. Certainly, I wouldn't have minded that. But that's workmanship, that's craftsmanship. And to see that played out to its highest potential is gratifying. And it makes me realize the damage that's done to our Father when we do that to his craftsmanship, which is us.
Exactly. Yeah, because that'd be the other side of that. And what I love about that craftsmanship piece of art that I get to look at every day in my office, it comes back to the question you asked is, well, okay, so what's the practical things? And I go, so if God is, imagine he's the master craftsman of your life, And what he's doing is he's inviting you into that craftsmanship with him. And there's the verse in the Bible where it says to listen to the words of Jesus and then put them into practice.
Mm-hmm.
And the word practice there is the same word that's used in that verse where it says we are his craftsmanship. He's molding us and shaping us. So when I want to give my life to the purposes, and it's the little things too. I think oftentimes, like you and I, like using hunting as an analogy, there's the hunt that happens like once a year. There's all the little conversations, the preps, the visits to Cabela's, all those little things somehow captures still the essence of what that hunt is. And so when it comes to like discovering your purpose and erasing the apathy inside, it's also a lot of those little things. It's looking at the life of Jesus. Okay, what was he doing? And then those opportunities are around us everywhere with my kids, my coworkers, my wife, or a classmate, teammate. It's just around us. And it's not like I have to spend every hour of my day doing a list. It's not about a list. It's about moments of opportunity that we don't want to miss. And so I just encourage people, like, find one moment every day to do something significant. Find one moment. And my reminder is oftentimes it's the little things that sometimes have more significance behind that you don't even realize. It's taking time out of your busyness. Like, I'll give a big example of a small thing. The other day I was going and filling up gas, and I noticed there was a huge line and people were stressed out. People were honking. And I could tell, like, the guy that was doing the gas attendant, it was just like some kid working there. Like, they're working their butt off.
Yeah, thankfully, because not many do.
Yeah, exactly, which that's another podcast. Talk about essential workers, right?
Yeah, right.
People we really need in society are those that plumbers and electricians and pump attendants. But my point was, all this to say was, in the craziness of it, I just said, "Hey man, how you doing? How's your day?" That was it. Just one question. "Hey man, how's your day?" He's like, "Oh, thanks for asking." That was it. Like, I didn't, it wasn't an epiphany. Like, the guy didn't like run around and like my life has changed. But I think in those little moments, just stepping into something where it's not about me. And you can do that. There's those opportunities around. You said it earlier. It's like that selflessness. And when we do that, you begin over time. And there's of course, there's bigger moments, and we don't want to miss those either. But the little moments add up over time. Before you know it, one little moment turns into 10 little moments, which is the significance of maybe one big moment. And that's not, and then every day you're kind of going, sitting in bed at night, putting your head down, going, yes, in the midst of all the stress and the busy that's there, I can look back to one or two moments in today that I did something that wasn't about me, maybe had an impact on somebody else's life. And what's crazy is that stuff will come around. It's like a boomerang. It's amazing how you can make a deposit somewhere and you just kind of go, all right, my life feels like I have a little bit of purpose. So if you're here, this is why I tell people who are struggling with depression. Start with one little thing. You're in a deficit of purpose. You have gotten to a point where it's like anything. If you're at the bottom of a tunnel or a well and you look up and you're like, how am I going to get out of this thing? It's like someone who is in debt $10 million and you're like, how am I going to get this? This is impossible. Yep. You just got to start little things and don't worry about the big stuff. Just focus on some little things. I'd rather accomplish a few little things than never do the big things. Because then you're just living with more of that cycle of disappointment, apathy, and so forth.
And hopefully that practice becomes one of life's healthy addictions, because once you taste that feeling, and that's when I think when you see people, and some people run hot and cold, I get it. You're all into certain things, and then you have an area where you drift, and we'll do another episode on that too. But I want that feeling again.
Yeah.
And I think when people do that, all of a sudden it becomes maybe, and that's how easy it can become the new you. Yes. And the new attitude is because you get a taste of how great it feels.
Totally. Absolutely. And I think that the last thing too is there is a adventure in the challenge of recognizing that what I'm doing is helping overcome that gap in my own life, or that void where I'm feeling apathetic or a sense of insignificance. And so like, great, that's a challenge. I want to overcome that. I don't want to be a man of apathy and being passive and all those things. But also realizing that every time I make a deposit in somebody else's life, I'm fighting the battle against their demons, against their lies, what they're going against. And so see yourself as like this warrior, that an act of kindness and compassion. And at times it may require an act of truth and bravery and courage. And that can feel like, yes, I'm standing for something. I have a backbone. And I think we need more encouragement of that too. Stand on a conviction. So conviction and compassion can go together. And when you step into moments of conviction or you step into moments of compassion, the return on that is huge for us, but also the return, the impact on somebody else.
And that's when I used the word war a minute ago, and meant it as a war can be anything, any challenge, any battle. And then I go back to, once again, hearing what you just said. I'll read the sentence again, because if you heard it earlier and it ran right by you, but men are at their best when they are giving their strength, and that can be anything, sacrificially for the sake of others.
That's it.
And that's that war. That's how you can stir a new war in you, which I think is ultimately going to benefit you and those around you.
Exactly.
That's good. That's great stuff. And also a good excuse for us to talk about hunting. We didn't brag too much about having a successful hunt, because it would have been successful even if we hadn't filled the freezer. Yep. But thanks for listening, as always, and spending some time with us here on Vertical Pursuit, and we will see you next time. We invite you to subscribe to our podcast, comment, or message us, and check out our website at verticalpursuit.org. Download the VP app and check us out on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.